One of the positions that shows how weak a knight can be is the following. The knight here can jump to the square b7 and make a check, and that will be a fork, and he will win a piece, and the white player will be able to win easily. The funny thing is that the black knight cannot really take, because after knight takes, this situation is where the knight is one diagonal square away from the promotion square, and this is a rook pawn. Then the knight cannot do anything to stop the promotion, so a6. And well, if the king moves to c7, you can push to a7. The king cannot protect the square of a8 anytime. So if the knight moves, let's say wherever he wants to go, then a7, it will be too late for the knight. So even if the knight had gone anywhere else, the a7 and a8 move are unstoppable. In this situation, for example, the white's best move is rook takes pawn, getting rid of the pawn of the opponent, now going for an endgame where we go a rook against the knight, plus we also have a passed pawn, so white is winning this endgame. And it's funny how the black player cannot take the knight because of the same reason. Even the king in this case is in a different position, it doesn't make any difference. a6 wins. Right, this is a well-known drawish position when okay, I've just removed the knight from a8. It's a well-known stalemate. Basically, you just move the king to f1 or f2, and then the black player cannot move anything, the black pawn can't push forward, so this is a stalemate. When there is a knight, you have to be very careful. When there's a knight on a light square, like in this case, it could be, I mean, it's a8, but it could have been another light square, then you have to go to the light square. If you go to f2, this is a win for black. If you go to f1, this is a draw. So the reason is simple. Let's say we go to the light square, right? So no matter how many jumps the black player will play, he will always be going back and forth. So let's say the knight is approaching, and now, there's a check, for example, the king is moving, there's another check, the king is moving. Nothing's ever going to happen. And even if the knight jumps to a different square, let's say check, we're just going to be going back and forth. Even like knight g2, for example, there is still nothing to worry. And this is a draw because the black will be moving the knight forever, presumably. The reason is that we jump always on the same color square of our opponent's knight. So he goes to this square, to a dark square, we go to a dark square. And then he goes to a light square, we go to a light square. Right? So, but if, let's say the knight starts in a8 and we were here, if I had gone to f2, this will be the problem, because the knight will be jumping on the same color of my king. And that means that when the knight keeps jumping, he starts jumping and he comes around here, right? Eventually, I will not be able to go to this square, because the knight, which has been jumping on my square, has then been sitting. When the knight is in a dark square, for example, it controls the opposite color square. So if your king jumps on the same square of this knight, then that means that you cannot go to the other square, the only other square that is available, because it will be controlled by the knight. So now the square f1 is no longer available, and the black player will be able eventually to move the king away and promote the pawn. So let's make another example, this time from this position. The knight is in f8, so obviously we know where to go now. You just go in the same color square, and now the knight jumping just doesn't do anything ever, because he will jump only by giving checks. And if he doesn't give checks, either way he will not control the other square, because the knight will always be jumping in the opposite color square of our king, which allows us to go in the same square color of the knight, meaning that he will not be controlling the other square, the one where we want to go. For example, in this case, after king f1, the knight will not be controlling f2, because it's black to move.